All right, so I'm calling this talk, Let's Think Critically and Open-Minded About Aliens, subtitle, Sometimes the Truth is Really Weird. Basically, I want to start out just briefly introducing myself because some of you don't know me very well, and if this does end up becoming a video, then people won't know who I am at all. So I'm a teaching professor at Ohio State University. That means that I teach classes, undergraduate level classes, and I have no publishing responsibilities. So if you go and Google me and you're like, what does this guy think? You're not going to find anything because I don't write anything. I focus on ethics, philosophy of religion, and Asian philosophies. I have a decent background in science. I was like a physics minor, but I'm definitely not a scientist. I'm also not a ufologist. I'm just someone who's trying to catch up on a lot right now. This has only been a serious area of interest for me for a little more than a month now. So I do take the study of UFOs pretty seriously now. That's never been the case for me historically. But I recognize the debt to people who have spent a lot more time on this than I have. And I'm hoping that my value is something like bridge builder. This is something that I like to do in general. So like when I teach Asian philosophies, obviously what I'm trying to do is build bridges between Western philosophy, which is my home tradition, or my home traditions, and the Asian philosophies that I engage in. I've done some work trying to do debates between people who believe in God, people who don't believe in God, people who have different conceptions of God and the philosophy of religion. So if I have a skill that's relevant to this topic, that's what it is. Also, this is my greatest credential. I have a really kick-ass Rate My Professor rating. This is the claim that I'm going to be trying to unpack today. That over the last few weeks, it's become newly rational to believe some extraordinary things. As I said, I did post another slideshow that's kind of a predecessor to this one on Reddit the other day, and I had kind of three factions develop on the Reddit thread. The largest faction was, hey, this is helpful, thank you. And then there were two other factions. The faction that said, wow, you're not being a critical thinker at all. It's totally unreasonable to believe the kinds of things that you're talking about. There's not any evidence. It's all just hearsay. And then there's the people on the other side who are like, man, it's been rational to believe this stuff for a long time. You're really behind the curve. And maybe you're not going anywhere near far enough. Now, as I said, I've been teaching for a while, and I've been teaching at OSU for about 20 years. And I learned a long time ago that it's literally impossible to make everybody happy, so I'm not going to try. I'm going to try to just sort of walk some kind of middle ground. All I mean by this claim is not that it has never been rational to believe the things that I'm talking about for all parties, but that some things have happened over the past few weeks that have made it so that more people are more inclined to believe for good reason. Does that make sense? I'm going to give you a series of levels that I've developed for my own discourse and trying to understand this myself. Here's the levels. Level 0 is there might be aliens somewhere. Level 1, UFOs are physical objects behaving in extraordinary ways. So not weather balloons. Level 2, the U.S. government has alien vehicles and bodies. Level 3, a significant amount of UFO lore is factual. Level 4, the aliens are talking to us. And level 5, there's a galactic federation. The Redditors, I wanted to make sure I get as much attention on Reddit as possible, so I've upgraded my original scale to be a little more sensational. So this is, OMG, there are planets. So if you look out there, there's more planets than just ours. This is OMG, there are spaceships. OMG, there are aliens. They've been here for a long time. They've been talking to us, and they've been working with us. This is kind of the punchline of why the levels are structured the way they are. So, all right, good enough. It's been a wild few weeks, my friends, and this is all... Everything I'm about to state is a fact, right? So, all right, let's quickly talk a little bit of philosophy here, right? So there are facts about what people are saying, and those are not to be disputed, I think, right? Like, go and look at the testimony. This is the testimonial stuff, the historical occurrences that have been happening over the past few weeks. It's going to open up a lot of questions about some other alleged historical occurrences that we're going to be talking about. But the reason that we are talking about this here today is because over the past few weeks, some crazy stuff has happened in the testimony space. The things that people are saying and who is saying them and who's listening to them has radically changed over the past few weeks. So on May 31st, after reviewing all available UAP data, UAP, remember, is the new term for UFO. UFO originally meant unidentified flying object. UAP came along, unidentified aerial phenomenon, because they didn't want to commit to there being an object, just that there was some kind of phenomenon. And it's now unidentified anomalous phenomenon, because the phenomenon being discussed are not all aerial. Some of them are in the ocean, and some of them might be in space. So it's now unidentified anomalous phenomena. That's the term being used by the government right now. Another term they're using is NHI, which is non-human intelligence instead of aliens. In the UFO world, the term alien means a specific kind of thing, in particular, like another biological species like ours that gets in a mechanical spaceship and flies across to another planet. And there's debate in the UFO community over whether we should be calling these things aliens, because maybe they're not aliens, maybe they're transdimensional beings, maybe they're from the future. There's all kinds of things that are being discussed. I'm going to use aliens very broadly. So for me, aliens and non-human intelligences are extensionally equivalent. Fair enough? Great. So after reviewing all UAP data, a panel of NASA scientists concluded that there are metal orbs in the skies all over the world making very interesting apparent maneuvers. So there's a task force that's been put together by Congress that brought these panel of NASA scientists together, gave them all of the available non-classified data about what's being seen in the skies. They did a bunch of analysis on it, and this is the conclusion that they came to. So in particular, they're saying these objects are 1 to 4 meters in diameter. They're traveling at up to Mach 2. Some other reports have been up to much higher than that, Mach 20. I've even seen as high as Mach 28. Those of you who are not familiar with the Mach rating, that's the multiples of the speed of sound. So the fastest planes we have are in the Mach 7, 8, 9 range. I don't think we have anything that's really done Mach 10, except if you're launching a rocket into space. Look at your aerospace history. Mach 20 would be completely unprecedented. And Mach 2 is sufficient to rule out anything that's like a weather balloon, right? Weather balloons don't go Mach 2. All right. There's no wings or obvious forms of propulsion. There's no thermal signature. So if you had an engine that was burning a fossil fuel, you'd be creating a huge amount of heat. They don't put off a huge amount of heat. Obviously, everything we have that flies is either a balloon of some kind or a wing-based thing. These don't have wings. They're essentially spherical, and they go really, really fast. They are detectable on radar and sometimes on thermal sensors. This is not consistent. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't show up. But this is all supposed to indicate that these are, in fact, real physical objects and not sensor mistakes or weather balloons or some kind of glitch of the lighting or something like that. All right, so that was, as I say, May 31st. About a week later, an article published in the Debrief stated that David Grusch, a former intelligence officer assigned to analyze UAP-related issues, has given Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General extensive classified information about deeply covert programs that he says possess retrieved intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. So, look, from now on, this event will be seen as a pivot point in the discussion of UFOs. I'm going to continue to call them UFOs because they are unidentified and they are objects and they are flying, even if they can go into the ocean. They fly into the ocean like penguins do. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about the term flying. Why is this such a big deal? People have been saying things of this sort, that there is a secret program inside the government that has crashed UFOs and dead bodies and has been doing reverse engineering and stuff like that. People have been saying this for decades. Why are we paying so much attention to David Grusch? For several reasons. So first of all, let's get into a little bit of the details of what he's saying. We have quite a number of recovered craft of non-human origin. Something on the order of 12 is a number that people are throwing around. We also have some bodies of non-human pilots, probably at least 3 or 4. The parties responsible are engaged in a disinformation campaign to cover it up. These parties, the people who are covering it up, have illegally withheld information from Congress. This is why he is going through these whistleblower protocols, he's essentially saying that there are secret organizations that legally are required to report to Congress and are withholding information illegally. So he's accusing people of a crime under oath. He is doing this. And as I say, he said all of this under oath with obvious legal and professional consequences if he's lying. So this is not just some person who's come out of the military and has tales to tell about the past of, I once upon a time did this thing and now I get my book deal. This guy is very likely in pretty serious legal trouble if he's lying about what he's saying. Now, to be clear, he is not saying that he has firsthand seen these things. He is saying that he has talked to people who claim to be members of these UFO recovery programs. And his testimony is being taken as credible and urgent by all relevant parties. Who are all relevant parties? The intelligence community, Inspector General, the members of the Security Committee in the Senate, various people in the Congress, people who have sufficient, security clearances to be able to hear all the details, are all acting like they're taking it very seriously. More on that in just a moment. For instance, in June 24th, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence unanimously approved legislation aimed at digging out any UAP-associated technology that is or ever was controlled by the federal government. Here's a quote from that. Any person currently or formerly under contract with the federal government that has in their possession material or information provided by or derived from the federal government relating to unidentified anomalous phenomena that formerly or currently is protected by any form of special access or restricted access is to notify the director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office within 60 days of enactment and to provide within 6 months a comprehensive list of all non-Earth origin or exotic unidentified anomalous phenomena material possessed and to make it available to the Aero Director for assessment, analysis, and inspection. This is being done in a bipartisan way, which all by itself is indication that something crazy is going on. If anything right now can get done in this country in a strong bipartisan manner, then something's up. So this is the kind of evidence that we've never seen before. This kind of secondhand response to the testimony being given behind closed doors. Right? One of the things that we're puzzled by being outsiders without security clearances is we can't get all the details because the details are classified. I want to say one brief thing about classification of information. There was a quote I read recently that if one of our intelligence gathering devices or planes or spy satellites or something took a picture of the Statue of Liberty, that picture would itself be classified. Not because the Statue of Liberty is classified, but because the instrument resolution is classified. So if you produce an image of a certain resolution, then you can deduce that it was from a certain kind of instrument, which we don't want people to know we have, right? So even if it's okay for some of this data to come out as far as the subject matter, some of it's classified because of presumably the ways in which it's been gathered. Does this make sense? So you need a high enough security clearance to see it. We can't do that. These people are, and they're all taking it very seriously. That's the structure of this argument. On July 5th, an anonymous molecular biologist posted on Reddit claiming to have thoroughly analyzed 4 bodies of exobiospheric organisms, he calls them EBOs, while working for Battelle National Biodefense Institute in Fort Derrick, Maryland, from the late 2000s to the mid-2010s. I gave you a link to this. It's not hard to find now. If you just search for EBOs on Reddit, you'll find it. It's a very extensive something, right? It's either one of the best science fiction things ever written, or it is an accurate account of a person who's been studying a non-human organism for a while. I'll give you just a couple of details about this. Briefly, this person says, we've discovered that the EBO genome is a chimera of genomes from our biosphere and from an unknown one. They are artificial, ephemeral, and disposable organisms created for a purpose that still partially eludes us. So for those of you who are familiar with the Blade Runner science fiction world, there are beings that are sort of like droids would be in Star Wars, constructed beings, but they're not made of gears and metal, they're made of flesh. That's what a replicant is. So this is essentially a replicant that is a chimera. A chimera is a term for a being that is created by splicing the genes of multiple species. So the claim is that by analyzing the genetics of these EBOs, we can tell, and he gives extensive explanation of why he thinks this is the case, that these beings have been built, genetically engineered for some unknown goal. They're purpose-built, so some of them might be different depending on what exactly their purpose is, and they've done that using splicings together of human genes, some non-human genes. For instance, they seem to react to bovine growth hormone. There seems to be some evidence that they contain bovine DNA, and other DNA that's either just constructed from the ground up or from another genome, another biosphere entirely, which would be from another planet. A biosphere, by the way, is, if you think about the Earth, the atmosphere is all the air, the biosphere is all the living stuff. So another biosphere would be another whole ecosystem from a different planet.
What does ephemeral mean in this context?
Ephemeral, I take it, means not meant to last a long time. Kind of meant for a specific goal. I mean, it's near disposable.
It's like fast fashion of the universe.
Yeah, like fast fashion. They're fast fashion replicants.
So to live and die.
Yeah.
Do the work and die.
Do the job and die. He describes a being that sounds like the standard gray of UFO lore. So when you think about an alien, you think about a skinny being with grayish skin and a bulbous head and big dark eyes and no external nose and no external ears. That's the image of what's called a gray. That's essentially what he's describing, only he's describing it at a much higher level of detail, including that it has a tetraspheric brain. So instead of the two-lobed brain that we have, it has a four-lobed brain and a highly optimized body, including things like eyeballs that have, I think it's 6 or 9 different kinds of optical cones that are all optimized to cover a broader spectrum of the light spectrum so they could see much better than we can. That kind of stuff. If you want the details, go read this. It's a fascinating read. He also briefly summarizes a report he read containing information about EBO culture and religion that was allegedly obtained by, quote, directly interacting with an EBO. I'm just going to keep going. We got a lot to talk about. July 14th, so earlier this week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds introduced the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act of 2023. I'll read you just 2 selections from that. Legislation is necessary because credible evidence and testimony indicates that federal government unidentified anomalous phenomena records exist that have not been declassified or subject to mandatory declassification review. And then later on, there's this section. This term, legacy program, means all federal, state, and local government, commercial, industry, academic, and private sector endeavors to collect, exploit, or reverse engineer technologies of unknown origin or examine biological evidence of living or deceased non-human intelligence that predates the date of the enactment of this act. So Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds and friends are going after whatever these rumored things are. Grusch says there's UFO recovery programs and bodies. They want them. They want to know where they are. They want to have access to them. And ultimately, they want to be able to release that information to the public. This happened yesterday. The House Oversight Committee will hold a hearing on UAPs next Wednesday. We're done with the cover-ups. So outside of this tweet, Burchett and friends have been talking on the news quite a lot lately. It's clear that they have a lot of a testimony coming up, alleged first-person testimony. People who are saying to them, I have been working on UFO recovery programs. I've been reverse engineering things. I've been studying non-human organismal corpses. So what's going to happen next Wednesday? Something interesting. What can we conclude from all of this? I want to suggest that we now know with a high degree of confidence that there is a conspiracy going on. The only question is which conspiracy it is. So I'm going to talk about 2 versions of the conspiracy, 2 candidate conspiracies. The alien conspiracy, which is essentially that the whistleblowers are telling the truth, and there has been a conspiracy to cover up a secret UFO crash retrieval program for decades, going back to at least 1947. And the PSYOP conspiracy. PSYOP, right, psychological operations. This is, messing with the heads of your adversaries by saying things that aren't true, misinformation campaigns, propaganda campaigns. That's all PSYOP. So the other viable candidate for a conspiracy is that the whistleblowers themselves, Grusch and the people talking to Congress under oath, etc., they are part of some kind of conspiracy to get Congress and the public to believe that such a program exists. We could consider other forms of the PSYOP conspiracy. Congress is in on it, and they're trying to pull the wool over all of our eyes. They're trying to deceive the Stephen Browns and friends of the world. Who knows, right? But it's essentially that there's some human entity, some human person or groups of people, the Illuminati or whatever it is, who have some agenda, and that agenda is being achieved by making people believe that there is a UFO recovery program that's been going on for decades, right? So at this point, you don't have a choice. You have to be a conspiracy theorist. There is a conspiracy. It's just a question of which conspiracy it is. Is it there are aliens and we're covering it up? Or is it we're trying to fool you into thinking they're aliens because we're covering something else up? Yeah? If either of these is true, then something very weird is happening. And the weird stuff matters. So I'm going to go through both of these. I'm going to go through the alien conspiracy at length and the PSYOP conspiracy very, very briefly. But then I'll talk about how either one of these matters. Like, from a perspective of, should we just sit around and go back to business as usual? The answer is no. If either of those two things is true, and it seems one of them must be, then weird stuff's going on that is very important, and we should get to the bottom of it. And this is, in fact, the attitude that we're seeing, thankfully, in a bipartisan manner from our people in Congress. The rare yay Congress that we can cheer at this moment. All right, so let's talk about the alien conspiracy. I'm going to do this in 4 parts. Now, as I said, the UFO world is rich. A lot of stuff has been said. Not all of it is consistent. Not all of it is even close to consistent. There are radically different possibilities that people entertain to try to explain the testimony that's been going on for a long time. I'm agnostic about almost all of it. I say these days, the word of the day is maybe, right? Who knows exactly what's going on? So I want to drill down on a particular narrative that I want to kind of show you and then discuss. So let me give you the case for the alien conspiracy. There have been lots of informants and whistleblowers going all the way back to at least the 1940s. These are serious people with scientific and military backgrounds. The idea that the people who have been saying there are UFOs are all, drunk rednecks smoking pot on the weekend, that's not who these people are. These are people who have served in serious capacities in the military or in the scientific community adjacent to the military, and then come out and say this allegedly, apparently crazy stuff. Their testimony is coherent on its major points, though divergent in detail. So, as I said, I'm going to give you this kind of narrative that kind of runs through all the things that they're saying. But dig into the details, and sure enough, they do disagree in quite a number of ways. But the major points are coherent. And their testimony is being backed up by data, as observed by multiple simultaneous eyewitnesses, cameras, sensors, and sometimes interpreted by qualified experts. So sometimes, the skeptical side of the people who don't like what I'm doing these days, they're saying, this is all just testimony, and we can't trust testimony. You know how unreliable testimony is, and I do know how unreliable testimony is. If one person says, I saw a thing, you should not listen to them. If 1,000 people say they saw a thing simultaneously, and their accounts converge, then it's not so clear that they're not telling the truth. It looks like, the burden of proof does seem to be, in general, on the skeptic at that point, right? Well, 1,000 people said they saw it, man. Calm down. Unless what they're saying is something really, really weird, and then you might think the burden of proof is especially high. And it would be nice if we had some cameras and some sensors and other things like that. And in many cases, we do. We have people who have taken photos, and you know what it's like. If you saw a plane flying overhead right now, and you whipped out your smartphone and you took a picture of it, You would not be a very good picture. We do not have phones that are designed to take pictures of things flying through the sky. They're designed for taking pictures of things on the ground. So we do have some pictures. We do have some videos. I'll show you some of them. The military has better pictures and videos. We don't know how good the military's pictures and videos are because it's classified. Exactly because of how good the quality of the videos and pictures are, right? But there are some unclassified ones that we've seen, and those ones, as we've seen, have been studied by qualified experts like these people from NASA, and the things they're saying reinforces this idea that, yep, there are things flying around, the kind of things that people have been saying have been flying around for a while. And especially this most recent batch of whistleblowers, that's not a coherent sentence, especially this most recent of whistleblowers batch, seem to have a lot to lose and little to gain by making this up. This is unprecedented to have people not just weaving a yarn in front of a journalist, but testifying in classified hearings under oath with potential legal consequences. This is new. All right, so here's the core narrative I want to discuss. Roswell. There are people who suggest that the UFO recovery programs started before Roswell, but we're going to talk about Roswell as the inciting incident. So the Army Air Force recovered at least one vehicle and 3 or 4 bodies from Roswell. The Army Air Force is what it used to be called, and then before it was its own branch, before it became the Air Force itself. Kind of like Space Force, just spun off of the Air Force for reasons which now seem much more interesting. All right. J-Rod. There was one survivor who was able to communicate telepathically with the human interviewer. So there are people who claim, I'll give you more details on all of these things, that the survivor of the Roswell crash selected the name Rod for himself, that he was at a facility. They labeled the facilities allegedly by just single first letters, so J is the name of the facility. So there was one being, and he was able to communicate with one of us, and we have some records, allegedly. Reverse engineering, that the information gained from these interactions, the things we recovered from Roswell and maybe from talking to J-Rod, have been used to reverse engineer a number of modern technologies. And there is a specific craft, the TR-3B. Ultimately, this knowledge was used to create our own anti-gravity-based craft. And all of this has been covered up. So this has all been hidden by a sophisticated disinformation campaign involving threats to the safety of those who know the truth. So, as I say, lots of things are being said in the UFO world. I want to focus on these 5. I think if only these 5 are true, this explains all of the data, and we don't need anything else. Now, that's not to say that there isn't anything else. It's just that a sparse view would do a lot with these 5 claims. So I'm going to try to build a sparse view and see how far we can get with it. Why should we think that Roswell was, in fact, a UFO crash? Because the Army said it was. This is an official press release from the Army. I'll just read it to you. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the Sheriff's Office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield, and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. So this, as I say, is the official press release from the Army in 1947. This was put out by this guy, Major Jesse Marcel. He was the first person on the site of the debris field in Roswell. He previously worked on Operation Crossroads, which was nuclear tests in the Bikini Atoll. The 509th Bomb Group is the group in the Army Air Force that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If one were a non-human intelligence being interested in what was going on in the humans, you would understand why the non-humans would be hanging out around the 509th Bomb Group. He spent his career in the Air Force and retired as Lieutenant Colonel. Those of you who don't know military ranks, Lieutenant Colonel is pretty high, right? Colonels are right below generals. You got different layers of generals. Then you got 2 layers of colonels. So Lieutenant Colonels are the lower colonels. They're still a pretty big deal. So this is a career military officer who retired at the end of his career. Shortly after his press release, the one I just read you, the War Department statement came out and said that it was just a weather balloon. And he, at that moment, aligned with it. And there are actually pictures of him with pictures of what is clearly weather balloon fragments in somebody's office. And he said, yeah, never mind, it was just a weather balloon. Until about 30 years later, or 20 years later. In the late 70s and early 80s, I guess 30 years later, he began to speak publicly saying that it had been a spacecraft after all, and he'd been pressured into covering it up. Here's a quote: "They wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that, so all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was and to forget about it. It's nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently." He claimed that among the debris was an I-beam containing alien hieroglyphs written in purple, and it looked like this. This, as he says on here, this is what the symbols looked like. The colors what I recall, and these figures are about twice actual size. Seen and copied from memory. Not hypnotically retrieved. Okay, so one of the weird things in the testimony space for UFOs is that some of the things that people say are not ordinary memories. They only show up under hypnosis. Now, all of us should be skeptical about claims that only show up under hypnosis. So he's saying, this is not that. I remembered this, not hypnotized. That's what I saw. If you want to know more about this, there's a lot to read out there. I have not read all of these things. I haven't had the time. I've been trying to get really up to speed as fast as I can. But this is a book written by his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., and his wife, Linda Marcel. Jesse and Linda both claim to have seen, well, Jesse at least claims to have seen the debris and held it in his hands. And Linda is in alignment with what the later testimony is. Is it just Marcel and his family? No. The farmers, the people who worked at the security on the base, the nurses, the scientist who was brought in to talk about the trajectory of the thing that crashed. There are between 100 and 600 people in the Roswell area who have been interviewed and who are all corroborating the story that something crashed, and that there were bodies, and that it was not a weather balloon. This is a fact. All this testimony exists, right? We need to account for that fact. J-Rod. All right. Some of the testimony of those witnesses around the Roswell incident claim that one of the non-human organisms survived. So some say there was a survivor who was taken into custody around Area 51 in Nevada, where he lived for quite some time. Sergeant Clifford Stone claimed that J-Rod communicated through a form of telepathy and shared information about his species called the Ebens. Richard Doty, special agent for the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations, asserted that J-Rod assisted in developing advanced technology, helping U.S. scientists reverse engineer alien tech. Dan Burish, a biologist, maintained that he worked with J-Rod in an underground lab and that J-Rod suffered from a neurological disorder related to time travel. Now, those of you who know me know I don't think time travel is possible. So I have strong opinions about time travel. Boo time travel. So I hear this data, and I am a little skeptical. I'm a lot skeptical, right? No, it wasn't time travel, so I'm just going to discount this guy right away. This guy has done some weird stuff that, he was involved in things that he later said were misinformation campaigns, and I don't remember all the details, but you can kind of go through these stories, and for everybody who says, not everybody, for many of the people who make these claims, there's some kind of debunking story to go alongside it. Here's this person who says this, and this is why we shouldn't trust them. That's a pretty common theme. So that's data we have to account for, right? There are debunking claims present for pretty much everybody involved here, but here are three people who claim that they either directly talked to J-Rod or worked on projects associated with J-Rod in some way. And then, my friends, if we're really taking this seriously, there's a video of an alleged interview between a human who has some kind of telepathic connection to J-Rod. I'm just going to show this to you, and then we have to think about it.
You removed the soundtrack from the tape before you turned it over to this program. That's correct. I can't allow the voices of the project personnel to be heard by the general public. There's a very good chance their family or friends on the outside might recognize them.
Isn't your purpose in releasing this tape to expose Area 51 to the world?
My purpose is to expose the existence of the aliens, not compromise these individuals. I made the decision to come forward. I'm taking precautions to protect my own identity, and I don't think it's fair for me to put these others in danger of exposure. In any case, the interview on the tape went nowhere. It was interrupted, as you'll see.
Can you describe for us what we're seeing?
All right, we're looking at the interview suite at S4. It's kept dark for the comfort of the aliens. The figure who is just barely visible in the left foreground is the telepath, and behind the camera is a raked seating area for observers. Although in this case, I believe the only other person present was a military aide. The alien is seated behind a glass partition in a biocontainment area, which is maintained at Biosafety Level 2, the lowest designation. That's primarily for the protection of the aliens, not us. The theory is that if they were going to infect us with an alien bug, it would have happened 50 years ago. In fact, all the indications are the aliens eliminated microbial and viral life from their own ecosystem long ago. They aren't susceptible to our diseases directly, but it has been shown that microbes can reproduce and form colonies within their respiratory systems, which tends to exacerbate the debilities they seem to suffer anyway in our environment. In fact, you can see here the alien is beginning to flag. The interview was not going well. The telepath was trying to clarify some points from a previous interview, but he wasn't receiving coherent responses. As you can see, the being is in real distress. At this point, the telepath is sending out a message to the medical staff. He's trying to communicate with the alien, but he's getting no response. There's very little he can do. There's no direct connection between his space and the biocontainment area. That's the aide stepping in on the right. The medical staff should be there by now. They're slow in responding. There they are. I have to say the medical personnel at S4 are less than first rate. They tend to be selected for their willingness to keep secrets rather than their medical competence. By the way, he's not shining that light into the eyes. It looks that way, but in fact he's checking for hemorrhaging around the eye sockets and in the nasal cavity. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to watch this.
All right. So that's where we're going to end with J-Rod. What about these claims about reverse engineering? If you're not familiar with the term reverse engineering, that's ordinary engineering is you have an idea and you come up with a plan, then you build a thing. Reverse engineering is starting with a thing that somebody else made and trying to figure out how it works. So you're going the other way around. So dozens of individuals have claimed that the U.S. government has engaged in engineering efforts of extraterrestrial technology. It's claimed that essentially the entire military-industrial complex has been built around these efforts, including Lockheed Martin, EG&G, Battelle Memorial Institute, Rand Corporation, Hughes Aircraft Company, and Northrop Grumman. This guy in particular is especially important. Philip J. Corso served in the United States Army from 1942 to 1963, and again earned the rank of lieutenant colonel. This is a quote from him. "Let there be no doubt, alien technology harvested from the infamous saucer in Roswell in July 1947 led directly to the development of the integrated circuit chip, laser and fiber optic technologies, particle beams, electromagnetic propulsion systems, depleted uranium projectiles, stealth capabilities, and many others. How do I know? I was in charge. As a matter of public record, I think the kids on this planet are wise to the truth, and I think we ought to give it to them. I think they deserve it." He wrote a whole book called The Day After Roswell, if you want to read it. I, again, have not read it, although I've skimmed parts of it. But he gives a detailed account of these reverse engineering activities. So the suggestion is this massive spike that we've seen in the 20th century, where we went from railroads and coal burning everything. We went from a steampunk world to artificial intelligence and computers and all that kind of stuff. And the claim that Corso is making is that Philip Corso, reverse engineered alien technology in cooperation with some of these engineering companies, military contractors, and rolled that out to the public. So I obviously my calculator watch was the right watch to wear today because maximum nerd, but also maybe this only exists because it was reverse engineered from the Roswell crash. I don't know what to think about any of this stuff. All right, let's keep going. The TR-3B. So a handful of people, so we are getting kind of more specific, and the number of people who've made these claims is getting smaller, right? But a handful of people have claimed knowledge of a human-made triangular vehicle made using anti-gravity technology reverse engineered from recovered UFOs. This corresponds with a trend in public UFO sightings of triangular craft matching the same basic description, especially this thing, which was a whole wave of observations. As I say, as said in here, thousands of people allege that they saw triangular craft floating over the city, and the military detected something on radar, flew over there, it flew away, and then the wave stopped. This was over the course of several days, so there were multiple encounters observed by, as I say, up to thousands of people. So this guy, David Grusch, worked as a contractor with the United States Air Force and Department of Defense in various capacities throughout his career. He allegedly held multiple top-secret SCI and Special Access Program clearances, and he claims that the TR-3B is a suborbital vehicle manufactured in the 1980s as part of a black project known as Aurora, using revolutionary magnetic field disruptor technology, which creates a circular magnetic field around the outer frame of the craft to reduce its weight by a large percentage. He gave some drawings, some illustrations of what this looks like in the times when he would speak in public about this program. This is one of them. So essentially there's this mercury plasma that moves around, which generates this magnetic field that reduces the effective mass of the object. So mass, you might recall, is, when we talk about weight is a weird property. Weight is the force being pulled down on a mass in a gravitational field. So mass is not weight. Mass is the property that is kind of fundamental below weight. Does that make sense? And it's essentially resistance to inertia. So, it is inertia. So resistance to changes in motion, right? So a heavy, massive object is hard to move. It takes a lot of energy to get it to change its momentum, right? A low mass object, it takes little energy to move it. So the claim is that this technology allows us to take a massive object and essentially turn its inertia down. So with a much smaller force, you can make it move much faster. This is at least the claim made about the TR-3B. There is footage. Now, look, there's footage, allegedly, of TR-3Bs. That actually shows up quite a bit. These people take pictures and videos of these triangular objects with lights in the corners and a light in the center. This is one of them. I'm going to show you my two favorite ones. This one is from Paris, and it was unclear exactly when this is, but this is from Paris a while ago. These are all image stabilized, so the edges move around because they're trying to keep the subject in the middle constant. But this is allegedly the TR-3B. You'll see on the top of it, there's a couple of wings. The idea is that this was first engineered as a regular jet, and then it was modified with anti-gravity technology. And what you'll see it do is generate an anti-gravity field, which will then encapsulate the ship, and then it will disappear. If you want to see what this looks like a little further away, here's an incident that happened in Jerusalem. This is about 12 years ago. And the thing that's interesting about this is it's 4 different photographers from 4 different angles. So it'll sync up. So it's going to start over there, and then I forget which one comes next. But you'll see all of them. So what you'll see is this is the city of Jerusalem. You'll see a light come down from the sky. hover over the city, and then something really weird happens.
זה יורד למטה.
אתה מצלם? אתה רואה?
רואה מה זה?
לא, כולנו רואים את זה.
מה זה?
יואו!
מה זה?
That is my favorite video on the planet.
Faster than Mach 2.
That is way faster than Mach 2. Again, the way this testimony works is when this happens, there's no sonic boom.
Yeah.
Those of you who aren't hip to the lingo, when something does achieve the speed of sound, you get a compression wave that creates a very loud noise that is not being observed in these objects.
So are those four different
Four
people?
Different cameras shooting the same thing. Now you might think to yourself, surely this is not real. And then, I can't make this up. The Department of the Navy itself filed a patent in 2016 called CRAFT, using an inertial mass reduction device. CRAFT using an inertial mass reduction device comprises of an inner resonant cavity wall, an outer resonant cavity, and microwave emitters. The electrically charged outer resonant cavity wall and the electrically insulated inner resonant cavity wall form a resonant cavity. The microwave emitters create high-frequency electromagnetic waves throughout the resonant cavity, causing the resonant cavity to vibrate in an accelerated mode and create a local polarized vacuum outside the resonant cavity wall. This looks like a triangular ship, which is allegedly a matched inertial mass reduction craft. This is just filed by the Navy. You can look this up and read it today. There is extensive formulas in there describing the theory about how this thing works. Maybe the Navy made this thing and then just patented it. Incidentally, there's something else that happened quite a long time ago. That patent, as I said, is 2016, but there's a paper that was published by NASA in August 1979 called Field Resonance Propulsion Concept, the abstract of which is as follows. A new propulsion concept has been developed based on a proposed resonance between coherent pulsed electromagnetic waveforms and gravitational waveforms, or space-time metrics. Using this concept, a spacecraft propulsion system potentially capable of galactic and intergalactic travel without prohibitive travel times has been designed. The propulsion system utilizes recent research associated with magnetic field line merging, hydromagnetic wave effects, free electron lasers, laser generation of mega-Gauss fields, and special structural and containment metals. Research required to determine potential field resonance characteristics and to evaluate various aspects of the spacecraft propulsion design is described, and later on in this relatively short paper, there's a section called UFO research. Remember, this is from 1979. UFO studies indicate that the unexplained residual UFO phenomena, that is, those that don't turn out to be weather balloons and camera glitches, may be due to extraterrestrial visitors, parapsychological experiences, or a combination of the two. If some UFO phenomena are caused by extraterrestrial visitors in very advanced spacecraft, then the frequency of visits and the large number of different types of visitors, many different humanoids have been described, imply an ability to cross large stretches of galactic and intergalactic space in relatively short time frames. If the speed of light is the true limit of velocity in space-time, then the potential extraterrestrial visitors must utilize a form of transportation which transcends space and time to keep the trip times short. UFOs are often observed to disappear instantaneously. In a subset of these cases, the UFO later appears at a nearby location, implying a disappearance from and a reappearance into space-time. The high-speed right-angle turns, abrupt stops, or accelerations of UFOs in the absence of sonic booms, despite calculated speeds of 22,000 miles per hour, which is Mach 28, or more, suggest that UFOs may generate an artificial gravitational field or otherwise use properties of space-time which we are not familiar with. UFO propulsion systems appear to involve electromagnetic or hydromagnetic processes, as evidenced by radioactive effects on the environment, such as burns, dehydration, stopping of automobile engines, TV and radio disruption, melting or alteration of ground and road surfaces, power disruptions, and static electricity effects. This data suggests that the unknown relationship between electromagnetic and gravitational fields may be used in UFO propulsion systems. So this is the data that we saw the NASA scientists give us some version of a few weeks ago, another version of it from the late 70s, essentially saying the same thing. There are objects flying around, they're going really fast, only instead of we have no idea how it works, these guys are saying we do know how it works. Way back in 1979, and essentially the technology that they're describing is the technology in the Navy patent and is the technology being alleged by these whistleblowers. We're almost done. There's a cover-up. That's the last piece of the standard narrative. The task of piecing together the truth or falsehood of this core narrative is made hugely difficult by the known presence of a conspiracy to deceive. So again, we know some people are trying to deceive us. We don't know who they are and why. We don't know if they're covering up aliens or if they're trying to get us to believe that somebody's covering up aliens. But somebody is lying to us, and that makes our task of trying to understand what's going on especially difficult. The small details that fuel existing debunking attempts could have been placed by one party or another to sustain the disinformation. If there is a well-funded, well-structured disinformation campaign, then all of these debunking claims that get made might be set up in some way. And interestingly, it might even be the case that some parties have willingly participated in the disinformation campaign as a means of getting some form of the truth out there while avoiding excessive retaliation. Remember the guy releasing the J-Rod video. Are you trying to tell us that stuff's going on at Area 51 and you want us to go in there and figure out what's going on? No, I just want you to know that there are aliens. That particular attitude is consistent with somebody knowingly spreading disinformation about what they believe to be true so that little bits of the data get out there, right? I'm telling you the truth about an alien, and I'm telling you some lies so that I'm not retaliated against. Implications of the alien conspiracy. If the alien conspiracy is the real conspiracy, we have to reevaluate our place in the universe. We need to rethink aspects of our physics and biology. If faster-than-light travel is possible, if we can spin around a bunch of mercury plasma and disconnect from the quantum field in such a way that it reduces our inertia, that's stuff we don't have in our standard physics. Obviously, we have to ask a lot of questions about our biology. How long have these things been here? How much have they been involved in the evolution of this planet? We might need to rethink that. We might need to rethink where life came from. Maybe life came from somewhere else. Do we have common ancestors with these beings? We have to ask all those kinds of questions. We'll need to revisit the entire history of UFOs and the paranormal. If it turns out that Grusch is correct, that there are UFOs and non-humans like J-Rod, then we have to skim back through the whole history of our planet and go, how many things that we thought were weird are explained by this? And that's quite a bit of work. And we're going to have to expand the sphere of politics because, boy, you thought it was hard to get people to agree with each other in the city of Columbus, in the state of Ohio, in the nation of the United States, on the planet Earth. Now we're going to have to deal with a new field, which is aptly called exopolitics. This is a guy, Michael Salla, PhD. He's a political science kind of guy. I forget, maybe he's not poli-sci, but he studies politics. He was at University of Melbourne, I believe, and he publishes this book, and he has a blog on the internet, exopolitics.org, where he talks about stuff that sounds nuts. You know, I look at this book, and I judge it by its cover, and I say, there is no way that this book is something that I'm taking seriously, and I bought this book today, and I'm starting to read it, because I don't know, man. Now, look, this is not being sparse. Remember, what I'm trying to do here is be sparse. I think with the core facts that we talked about, Roswell, J-Rod, reverse engineering, the TR-3B, we have an interesting enough narrative to explain what we're seeing going on with Grusch in Congress and all that kind of stuff. We don't need 57 different species in a galactic federation, but that's what Michael Salla believes, I don't know at this point. There's lots of maybes in the air. But we'll also have to rethink the kinds of things that I, Stephen Brown, have spent my whole life on. The nature of ultimate reality and our place within it, arguments for and against the existence of God and souls, the problems and promises of religious pluralism, proper understanding of individual and social well-being, cross-cultural dialogue of the most difficult form. If this is real, then the kind of work that I care about most, I'm studying Western philosophy, I'm studying Asian philosophy, how do the ideas in Buddhism relate to the ideas in Hinduism, relate to the ideas in Jainism, relate to the ideas in Christianity, relate to the ideas in Plato. This is what I've done my whole life. Now I have more people to talk to. I'm going to read you some quotes from the EBO leaker, the Reddit leaker, the microbiologist who described the genetics and biological structure of these EBOs. This is what he says about their culture. EBOs believe that the soul is not an extension of the individual, but rather a fundamental characteristic of nature that expresses itself as a field, not unlike gravity. In the presence of life, this field acquires complexity, resulting in negative entropy, if that makes sense. This gain in complexity is directly correlated with the concentration of living organisms in a given location. With time and with the right conditions, life in turn becomes more complex until the appearance of sentient life. After reaching this threshold, the field begins to express itself through these sentient beings, forming what we call the soul. Through their life experiences, sentient beings will in turn influence the field in a sort of positive feedback loop. This in turn further accelerates the complexity of the field. Eventually, when the field reaches a critical mass, there will be a sort of apotheosis or divine union or enlightenment or something like that. It's not clear what this means in practical terms, but this quest for apotheosis seems to be the EBO's main motivation.
Jesus Christ.
The author of the document, so he's reading this document. He doesn't claim to have had this interaction. He said when he was briefed into the program, he read a document about their culture. The author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as an appendix. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that memory and experience persist as part of the field. This fact would influence the philosophy and culture of EBOs, resulting in a society that doesn't fear death, but which places no importance or reverence on individuality. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. Paradoxically, they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. I have already started the work. Okay, so it's kind of like space Buddhism, and they don't believe in the individual self except as it emerges from the storehouse consciousness, but then it goes out of existence when they die, but the karmic field kind of gets affected by that over time, and it emerges from life, so it's also kind of like the Force. We're off and running. There's work here to do. My work. Job security for Steve. If this is real, we have a lot to do to understand who these beings are and what they've been up to and what they're thinking and how our thoughts relate to theirs and our spirituality relates to theirs. And old school materialist atheism is in a lot of trouble. 1 second. What if it is a PSYOP conspiracy? Okay, so if this is the real conspiracy, remember, there is a conspiracy, we just don't know which one it is. It's either the one that we've been told by all these whistleblowers, or it's something like this, that the government is trying to get us to believe in that other conspiracy for some other reason. If this is the real conspiracy, okay, look, honestly, it's hard for me to see how this conspiracy could even work. How could anyone get people from all over the planet, in all walks of life, by the dozens and hundreds and thousands, to converge on the same basic elements of the core narrative we've discussed for 75 years? It's very difficult to see how any human entity could carry on a PSYOP of this magnitude. But if it is somehow possible, it's incredibly disturbing and should lead us to immediately investigate who is responsible and what they're hiding from us. To date, I have heard no plausible hypotheses regarding how or why a PSYOP campaign of this complexity and scale would be necessary to accomplish mundane goals. So, conclusion, and then we'll talk all you want. Either A, UFOs and aliens are real, and there's been a decades-long conspiracy to cover it up, or B, there's been a decades-long conspiracy to make us believe that UFOs and aliens are real, and there's been a decades-long conspiracy to cover it up. There's definitely a conspiracy. We just need to figure out which one it is, and I really hope that it's the aliens.